Alright, I am back with another build, and today we have an interesting one. So I, as a base concept for this build, wanted to make a build that took as much advantage of Misty Step as possible to create what I'm calling a warp strike character, someone who teleports in, attacks with melee attacks for a big amount of damage, and then teleports out. Inspired partially by Noctis from Final Fantasy 15. And then, as I kind of started to make the build, trying out different class and subclass combinations, and eventually different racial options as well, because believe it or not, that came into it, I ended up kind of evolving this build into something a bit more. So today we're making a Githyanki, who, in the typical fashion, I've kind of done stuff like this before, has defected from Vlaakith, and as such is using their Githyanki-based abilities, which is going to be enhanced by our class and subclass choices, in order to become an effective kind of like hunter of evil Gith. Basically the anti-Gith Githyanki, which I find is quite fun. So obviously this build can be run by laezel. But then I kind of took some inspiration from, let's just say, a certain anime called Goblin Slayer, which, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not a huge fan of, but I do kind of like the design of the main character, and kind of, you know, the general, like, kind of idea of a big, heavy dude in armor. So, you know, that was kind of my idea there, and in the end, I ended up coming up with something fairly interesting lore-wise for the character, which we'll get into as I kind of explain, like, the mechanics of the build. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to be kicking things off as a Paladin today. This is going to give us access to all the armor and weapon proficiencies that we like, so you can get things like heavy armor, which we will be predominantly using on this build. As I said, we are playing as a Githyanki, which is going to give us a ton of stuff right off the bat. We're going to get astral knowledge, allowing you to gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability, which can be very, very useful in certain situations. There's also the ability to use mage hand once per long rest, and for typical racial movement, as well as you gain some armor and weapon proficiencies if you didn't have them already, but we do, so it's not a huge deal. For the subclass, when I was kind of originally conceptualizing this build, I'd first gone with Oath of Ancient Paladin, because I was going for a slight kind of nature, ethereal feeling, but that was before the build became a Githyanki, as well as I even went through Gloomstalker Ranger, but unfortunately the build just didn't quite feel as powerful, but it did help influence some design choices that, again, I'll be getting into later. But of course, I have decided to go with Oath of Vengeance for today. It is just going to give us a lot of stuff that overall benefits the build more, in my opinion, which again we'll get into as the video goes on. So in theory, like I said, you could play Oath of Ancients, you could even play a Gloomstalker Ranger in place of the Paladin levels here. However, overall, I do feel like you're going to get a stronger build out of going the Oath of Vengeance route in the long run, so that is my personal recommendation, but otherwise, feel free to choose something else if it pleases you, I guess. In fact, I would say that the concept I'm going to be presenting today can be used for a variety of different builds, not just this one, but I did kind of want to show off what this specific build was capable of. Speaking of, let's talk of abilities. Strength is at 8, which may seem contradictory, but I think by judging by the high charisma, you can probably guess where I'm going to go with this. Dexterity is at 10, we don't need it as much since we are wearing heavy armor. Constitution is at 16 to give us a decent HP pool, we'll have just over 100 HP by the time the build is done. Intelligence is at 11, because unfortunately the way the skills are spread here, we can't really get an even score across the board, so unfortunately we did have this awkward extra point, so we have 11 intelligence. Wisdom is at 12, so that we can have a chance at making those nasty saving throws, and charisma is at 17, so we're going to be bumping this up with a half feat later. For our skill proficiencies, I went with the soldier background again. This is a build that's perfect for laezel if you wanted to run it like that. So we've got an intimidation and athletics, which feels right. That athletics kind of helps patch up our lower strength, as well as grabbing insight and medicine for our skill proficiencies from Paladin. So, depending on how you want to level this build, you may want to multi-class into Warlock right away, because yes, we are using Warlock. However, I do feel like you could play this build as a kind of straight Paladin in the early game, if you kind of swap some stats around to maybe make your strength 16, and then maybe keep your charisma a bit lower. You could definitely play around with the stats a little bit. I would probably swap that charisma and strength you can see on the right there, and then maybe dip intelligence down a bit to put more points into other places. Regardless though, I would suggest multi-classing into Warlock straight away, as it is where we're going to be getting the majority of the stuff that we want, so we're going to go there now. First off, we get to choose some cantrips. I'm going to be grabbing Mage Hand here so that we can use it more than once per long rest, because that feels in line with Githyanki. As well as, because I have the Mistress spell mod installed, which is available on all platforms and I highly recommend you download, we get the Mind Sliver cantrip, a psychic damage cantrip that is going to allow us to do 1d6 psychic damage, which will scale up as we level, and also applies a 1d4 penalty to saving throws against a creature you hit if they don't succeed their intelligence save. And intelligence saves are actually pretty easy to hit all throughout the game, since not a lot of creatures invest into intelligence. And this is going to help because we're going to have a lot of effects that require saving throws from our opponent, so Mind Sliver is going to be a consistent, decent option that we can use throughout the whole build. For our subclass, we're going to be going with the Archfey today. Archfey is going to allow us to play on the Githyanki psionic abilities a bit more, giving us access to things like Fey Presence to possibly charm or frighten nearby enemies, both of which we'll want to do. We're also getting access to a couple of new spells, and it's actually up to you kind of what you want to pick here. I would say that Fairy Fire and Sleep are both solid options, and we'll have options like Speak with Animals come up later through different means, as well as you could pick up Hex here if you want, but we're actually going to be replacing this with Hunter's Mark a bit later on, so I don't think we need Hex here. Up to you really what you want to pick here. It's a choose your favourite situation. At Warlock level 2, we're going to gain access to another level 1 spell, so again, choose what you like. I could see if you have Mistress spells, Insinuation being quite interesting for another psychic damage spell. You could pick up Bane, but we are going to get that later. I'm going to grab Tasha's Hideous Laughter for another psionic spell. We're also going to gain access to Eldritch Invocations here, and the ones I'm going to choose may surprise you. First up, Beguiling Influence to give us proficiency in Deception and Persuasion, which we didn't already have, so with our high charisma, this is going to work out quite nicely in our favour, allowing us to be the face of the party. We're also going to go with Mask of Many Faces to gain Disguise Self, pretty much at will. So why would I go with this? Well, here's the thing. When I was making this big, heavy armor character and then decided to use Githyanki, I mean, these dudes look pretty scrawny. I mean, I'll be honest, even though the armor design is pretty damn cool, this build looks a bit goofy with the current design. However, if we use Shapeshift to bump us up into a strong masculine character, for example, or feminine, depending on what you want to go for, we actually now get to stay in our fully disguised visage, but now with a massive hulking form. As well as this is going to benefit us both mechanically and roleplay-wise, I just think it's a really cool option to include on the build, and I feel like naturally a defected Githyanki who's wearing full armor would use magic to alter their how others perceive them in order to remain disguised. So overall, I just think it's a really fun option that I think is going to work out great, both visually and with roleplay. As a Githyanki, we're also going to get Enhanced Leap once per long rest here, which is quite nice. So overall, this is a pretty solid level. At Warlock level 3, we're going to be gaining access to our level 2 spells, and we are going to grab Darkness, because eventually we will have a method of using a helmet to ignore blindness, so it'll be a pretty useful control spell. We're also going to gain access to a Pact Boon here, and of course we're going to Pact of the Blade, to make it so that our equipment can use Charisma, or I should say our weapons can use Charisma for the attack and damage rolls. At Warlock level 4, we're going to gain access to some more spells and cantrips. At this point, I would take Friends, allowing you to gain advantage on charisma checks. Again, it's more psionic manipulation and makes us a better party face. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yes, I'm purposefully avoiding Eldritch Blast because I genuinely don't think we need it on this build, so we don't need to grab it here. We can also pick up another spell at this point from Warlock, and at this point, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick. We do have a pretty solid option here. Now, you're probably thinking we should go with Misty Step, obviously, but actually we're going to be picking this up in just a moment. I'll explain as we go. However, we could go for something like Mind Spike from Mistress Spells, giving you another psychic damage spell that can prevent targets from turning invisible. Could be fun. Hold Person, always pretty devastating when it goes off. Mirror Image is a great defensive spell that actually really helped out in testing, so I feel like this one could work. But again, and I like the idea of, like, again, creating illusions and such like that, so it's entirely up to you. We're also going to gain a usage of Misty Step once per long rest from our racial choice here. Another thing that kind of influenced the racial choice for this build. Now, we also get a feat here, and if you have the Tasha's Feats mod installed, which I do recommend as it's available for all platforms, and it just adds some pretty damn balanced and cool stuff from tabletop, we're going to go with Fey Touched because it only makes sense. This is going to automatically give us Misty Step, which we can cast as a level 1 version, once per long rest for free, and then the rest using our normal spell slots. And of course, we also get to bump up our Charisma as a half feat, And we do get to choose another spell to add, in which case I am going to go with Speak with Animals from here, so now that we have all of those roleplay options available to us. Because all of these other spells that you think would be pretty useful, we actually just get through leveling up. So yeah, overall this is just a one-stop shop for a bunch of things that we really like to get. And at Warlock level 5, we're going to be picking up extra attack from our Deepened Pact feature, as well as a level 3 spell, and we're going to go with the Archfey's added spell list option, Blink. This is a great spell for the theme of the build. We basically, at the end of our turn, on an 11 or higher off a d20 roll, we get to blink out of existence, becoming completely invincible, which it feels just like such a fun thing for the whole teleporting theme. You teleport in, start hitting people, and then blink out of existence and they can't hit you. Then you blink back in, hit them again, then teleport out of there with Misty Step. You just have so much maneuverability and overall survivability from this ability. Now, obviously, how many times do I just say ability in different words? But anyways, obviously this comes with the caveat that this won't always happen, and there is a slight issue that you cannot maintain concentration while blinked into the ethereal realm, so keep that in mind. But otherwise, it's a very fun and flavorful ability that I highly recommend. We also are going to get another Eldritch Invocation at this level, and I recommend Maya the Mind to grab Slow Spell, allowing you to target up to 6 creatures and slow them, giving them a penalty to their AC and dexterity saves, as well as reducing how many actions and bonus actions they can take in a turn. They have to pick one or the other. Now that we have 5 levels of Warlock, it's time to jump back over to Paladin. With Paladin, we're going to be picking up a fighting style, and I'm obviously going to be going with Great Weapon Fighting in order to gain a bit of extra damage on our two-handed attacks, because as you can see, we got a big-ass greatsword. We're also going to get to prepare our Paladin spells as we do gain spellcasting at this level, and because our charisma is already so high, we have quite a few to choose from. Obviously, we're going to be taking these Smite spells. Wrathful Smite, adding extra psychic damage and potentially frightening a target, just feels very on theme. Thunderous Smite for extra damage of a thunder variety and can possibly knock enemies prone, and Searing Smite for fire damage and a consistent burning effect. All of these, except for Thunderous Smite, do require concentration though, so keep that in mind. We're going to go with Compelled Duel, because I definitely think this is a character who would walk up into combat and say, hey, fight me next, and then start teleporting and doing all sorts of shenanigans. Command for more psionic influence. I love making enemies drop their weapons, especially Steel Watchers. It really does debilitate them. And finally, your last one can be whatever you like. I think Heroism is on theme here because it gives you a bit of extra HP and can make you immune to being frightened, which again, Githyanki's have a pretty steel mind. I think that makes sense. At Paladin level 3, you're going to gain access to your subclass features, namely Hunter's Mark, which we're going to want to be using quite a bit to be able to do additional damage, as well as Apt Your Enemy to potentially frighten them, and Vow of Enmity to gain advantage on attack rolls against an enemy. Everyone knows at this point, but if you cast Vow of Enmity on yourself, you gain advantage on attack rolls against every enemy for 10 turns. It's kind of busted, and I do kind of expect this to be fixed in patch 8. If it is, and we don't have access to this ability anymore, but I mean, it survived this long while being very popular, so I don't think they'll touch it. You can actually use the Gloves of the Automaton to gain 10 turns of advantage as well if you want, so that is an option for you there. We're also going to become immune to disease, with a very few cases where that comes up, and you do get an extra spell here as well. At level 4 of Paladin, we're going to get to prepare an extra spell. Again, it's a pick your favourite type situation. And we also get to pick a feat. And I mean, we are a two-handed weapon build. We got to go with Great Weapon Master. It is just free extra damage here. Since we have the ability to consistently gain advantage, we will be able to negate the -5 attack roll penalty for just a free extra 10 damage, basically. As well as if we land a critical hit or kill someone with a melee weapon attack, we can make an extra weapon attack as a bonus action on that turn, just giving us a ton of extra, you know, combat power, which we love. Now, we don't actually need to go to Paladin level 5 here, although if you did, you would get Misty Step, even though we already have it. So we're going to jump back over to Warlock for our level 6 subclass feature, Misty Escape. Upon taking damage, you become invisible, and on your next turn you can cast Misty Step, though this will break your invisibility. So as a reaction, you just get to immediately become invisible, slink away, and teleport even more. Just kind of felt on theme for the build. We're also going to gain access to another level 3 spell, and at this point you have plenty of options available to you. I like to pick strong concentration options that will stick around on the battlefield for the most part, but there are some other cool choices from Mistress spells as well. My two recommendations would be Psionic Blast or Thunderstep. Thunderstep would give your teleportations a bit more offensive power, allowing you to teleport yourself and up to one adjacent ally to a place you can see. So it's a bit like Dimension Door in that regard. But when you teleport, you leave 3d10 of thunder damage from where you teleported, so any enemies that are around you are going to feel that effect. So I would recommend this for sure. Moving on to Warlock level 7, we're going to gain access to level 4 spells. And I mean, Dimension Door is here, but obviously we just got Thunderstep. If you're not using the Mistress Spells mod, I would take this here, but if you are, you can leave it in place of Thunderstep. There's also things like Greater Invisibility if you want to go down that route, but I like to scroll again down to Mistress Spells and pick up Ralathim's Psychic Lance for a big 7d6 psychic damage attack, which can target a target's mind and possibly incapacitate them, meaning that they're just shit out of luck for a turn. So overall, it just kind of feels on theme for a powerful Githyanki build to have this ability. We also do get to use another Eldritch Invocation, and we're going to pick up Dreadful Word to grab the Confusion spell, allowing you to potentially confuse a group of enemies, causing them to wander and aimlessly and attack at random, and maybe even just skip their turn entirely. At Warlock level 8, the final level of the build, we are going to gain access to another spell. Again, it's a pick your favourite situation, take whatever you like. We've pretty much got everything I would say this build needs, so I'll pick up the aforementioned Psionic Blast, just so it's an option. We also did get to choose another feat at this level, and at this point I would just take an ability score improvement and max out that charisma. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is the typical battlefield control options that normally come with playing a Archfey Warlock. You're going to be able to charm and frighten enemies. You're going to be able to put down effects that can, you know, kind of disrupt enemy movements and such like that. But obviously the main thing here is your own movement. You're able to teleport a massive amount of times, being able to be versatile and appear anywhere on the battlefield. Obviously, the kind of caveat of this build is the limited spell slots. We have 3 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 4 spell slots. Now, while those 2 spell slots recover every short rest, that means we only have 2 max damage smites per combat, which I can understand why people might not like that. But overall, if you play this build right and work with your teammates in a efficient fashion, you won't feel that weakness. I did feel it a little bit in solo testing, and when I was solo testing this build took a little bit more damage than I would think is reasonable. I don't know what was going on today, but my luck on enemy rolls was really bad. Even though I have solid AC on this build and all that, I was just getting hit left, right, and center. It was a bit strange, but then I just don't know what happened. But otherwise, that could either just be luck or it could be representative of the build. I don't know. But like I said, you're just going to have a ton of power available to you. You're going to be able to do everything with your charisma, which is nice. I mean, Warlocks just kind of provide that naturally. And again, when you do want to do big damage, you are going to get big damage. So, let's talk about the equipment. So first off, oh, you know what I will do first, actually? Let's cast the Shapeshift ability that I was talking about earlier. I like to go for Masculine Strong Drow, because, and this is going to sound bad, but the darker skin does blend into the armor quite a bit here, allowing you to kind of get a more natural feeling look overall, and now our character feels a lot more intimidating. But yes, looking at the build, this is what we've got to work with. Because we're playing as a Githyanki, even though we are disguised as a different race, we still get to benefit from the Githyanki's equipment-based abilities, such as the Silver Sword of the Astral Plane being our final endgame weapon. When wielded by a Githyanki, this weapon deals an additional 1d6 damage, which of course we are getting. A Githyanki holding this weapon has advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, resistance to psychic damage, and cannot be charmed. Of course, this is also our packed weapon, so it works great with our Charisma and is a +3 weapon overall. It's also going to come with a unique attack called Soul Breaker, allowing you to deal additional psychic damage and possibly stun enemies as well. Can be used once per short rest. Now, I will say that obviously there is the exploit in this game to get this right away in Act 1, so if you want to go through and do that, you can. However, you can also pick up the Soul Breaker Greatsword in Act 1, which is basically the same thing but slightly weaker. That 1d6 of psychic damage is a 1d4. We don't get the extra benefits like psychic resistance or charm immunity, but we do gain a +2 bonus to initiative rolls and the same Soul Breaker attack. So overall, I would say this is a solid Act 1 option if you want to get this legitimately in Act 3, but otherwise you can do the exploit. For a ranged weapon, we're just here just to have this for fun. We're going to gain the hunting shortbow. This will give us advantage on attacks against monstrosity type enemies, which won't come up so much, but it will work against Orin. And as well, we're also going to get a usage of Hunter's Mark once per long rest without having to use a spell slot. A lot of the item choices that I went for here are about spell slot conserving, because obviously we don't have a lot of them overall, so I felt like this was just a solid thing to just slap in the range slot since we're not really going to be using it otherwise. For our helmet, we have the Steel Watcher helmet. The wearer can see in the dark up to 12 meters and cannot be blinded, and we have advantage on Constitution saving throws, which is going to help for maintaining concentration. And overall, it's a great armor for hiding our whole face, so I wanted to use it here. In the meantime, though, you can use the Grim Skull Helm, which makes it so that we're immune to critical hits, gain resistance to fire damage, and also gain a usage of Hunter's Mark once per long rest as a bonus action. So overall, this could be a solid option for the build if you don't mind the look, which I personally do, so I think you're going to want to upgrade to the Steel Watcher Helm later on. I will also say, because I have it linked in the description, you can actually get a kind of regular Flaming Fist helmet that also completely covers your face in early Act 1 as well, at the Monastery Trail. It's like a pickup that you can find. I didn't bother getting it for this build, but you can pick it up if you want, and I've linked the wiki page in the description below if you want a decent face covering helmet. Moving on, for our cloak, we have the Nymph Cloak, which will give us a usage of Dominate Person once per long rest. Overall, again, it's just a powerful psychic option for the build that could really help us out. However, I could also see the Cloak of Displacement filling this slot as well, if you would prefer. We also have, for our armor, the Blackguard's Plate. All incoming damage is reduced by 1. You gain advantage on wisdom saving throw checks, which feels very in line in the build. However, you do have disadvantage on stealth checks. Now, this can be a bit of an issue. With disadvantage on stealth checks and our low dexterity base, you will have trouble maintaining that invisibility from our Misty Escape feature, but otherwise you should still be able to use the Misty Step part, no problem. But for another earlier game option, I could recommend any heavy armor with the Dwarven Splint Mail did speak out to me. It gives you a couple of extra bonuses, but the main thing it's going to give you is a +2 to Constitution if you want to be a bit more tanky. As far as the look goes, I mean, I'll colour it in our dye here, which is the Vlaakith dye from Fey Colours. I mean, I think it looks okay, but I do prefer the look of the Blackguard's armor overall. And before you say it, no, I did not go with the Armor of Persistence here, because I just wanted something that looked a bit bigger and bulkier, even though, yes, the Armor of Persistence is technically better. In fact, it is completely better. But I wanted just something a little bit different, so we've gone with the Blackguard's Plate today because I think it looks awesome on this build. Moving on to our gloves, we have the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. Whenever we deal radiant, thunder, or lightning damage, we inflict reverberation, which you all know what it does at this point, but the affected entity will have a penalty to their physical saving throws per remaining turn, as well as when they get enough stacks, you'll be able to deal extra thunder damage. Like I say, if you want to use the Gloves of the Automaton in this slot to gain resistance to lightning damage and advantage for 10 turns, you also could, kind of like an anime-style power-up, which I also think could be quite fun. But I did find that the Gloves of Belligerent Skies did help out a little bit when we could Divine Smite and such like that, or if we were using Thunderstep, but otherwise you can swap this out for anything that you like in the late game. The Legacy of the Masters could be quite good if you want, entirely up to you. And finally, for our boots, we do have the Disintegrating Nightwalkers here, meaning that we cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip on grease or ice, as well as we gain a usage of Misty Step per short rest. Speaking of, we also have the Amulet of Misty Step, giving us a usage of Misty Step per short rest as well. So that's 2 Misty Step per short rest. We also gain an extra Misty Step per long rest here, and an extra Misty Step per long rest here. So without any spell slots, we've got 4 Misty Steps, and we can continue to do so with spell slots if we so choose, or Thunderstep, or whatever have you. Since we're going to be using Disguise Self all the time, we also have the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring. While shapeshifting or disguising yourself, you gain a 1d4 bonus to all checks, which is very, very nice. As well as the Strange Conduit Ring, while concentrating, for us that'll probably be Hunter's Mark, we also do an additional 1d4 psychic damage on top of whatever Hunter's Mark gives us. So yeah, overall, I would say the equipment is kind of up to subjectivity. I would say any of these can be replaced, although I do like keeping mainly the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring, the Amulet of Misty Step, and the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. But honestly, you can change any of this, and this build will still function extremely well. Your main basic kit here of teleporting is really, really solid, and I do like it quite a lot. However, if you're not into the whole Fey Warlock thing and you want to get your teleportation another way, honestly, this build also works as just a straight level 12 Eldritch Knight. You'd get 3 attacks in a turn, you'd gain 4 feats, because fighting against this extra feat, you gain action surge. You know, there's a lot of different ways you could make this kind of concept of a build, but I just wanted to kind of show this off. I feel like this is a fun combination. Again, you get a lot of fun flavor and such like that, and overall it is a pretty decently strong build. I would say this, even despite its power and general tankiness, you are kind of going to be relying more on your allies. So I found solo testing to be slightly trickier with this one, but otherwise you should still be pretty strong. There's a lot of barking going on outside my window right now. I hope you guys can't hear that. Well, we're in the kind of end part of the video now, so it doesn't really matter. This is where I just kind of ramble on anyway. But yeah, no, so overall I am quite happy with this build. I think the flavor is really fun. I feel like you do get a lot of like kind of fun utility out of the movement options. I do think it has some weaknesses, like I say, despite the fact that this build should be rather tanky. Again, it did seem to take a lot of damage in solo testing, but as long as you're running this with a proper team, you'll be just fine. And again, with the sheer damage output that this build has, you will feel the power. And again, you have a bit of battlefield control, being able to charm and manipulate and do other battlefield control effects. But again, most people might think that this build is better, this concept is better done a different way, but again, I'm just trying to do as many unique concepts as I can, trying to do different things here and there, because let's be honest, I wish patch 8 came out yesterday. I'm telling you now, when patch 8 comes out, my builds are going to change forever. But for now, I'm just kind of going through, you know, all these kind of build ideas that I've had, but not really realized because I felt like other options were better. And this build does kind of fall into that category while still being a powerful, fun, flavorful build like I've always made. I definitely think this one has maybe more weaknesses than some of my more powerful builds, but overall, it's still a fun and viable option. Right, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.